Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics. Dio here. Today we have a 2008 VW Rabbit with a 2.5 liter. The complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on while the engine is running, and the fan also remains on while the engine is off. So when you turn off the engine, the fan remains on. So this vehicle is here in our shop so we can figure out why the fan is staying on while the key is off. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the complaint, we're gonna connect a scan tool to the vehicle to see what kind of trouble codes we have in the engine computer. After we retrieve the trouble codes, then we will talk about what directions we're gonna go so we can fix whatever that's causing this fan to remain on after the key has been removed from the ignition. So now let's go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. I'm gonna start the engine so we can confirm the complaint. So right there, as you can see, the engine is running and the check engine light remained on. So customer's complaint confirmed. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine and connect the scan tool to the vehicle so we can scan the engine control unit. So I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. I forgot to mention that the owner of the vehicle disconnected the cooling fan because it was staying on, and the cooling fan had already been replaced. Okay, so they had replaced the cooling fan, they installed a new cooling fan, but the new one is basically doing the same thing like the old one was doing. Okay, it's staying on when the key is removed. So let's scan it first, and then we're gonna go under the vehicle and look at the new cooling fan that they had installed. And after that, we're gonna reconnect it to see if it's gonna stay on. And then our diagnosis will basically start from that point going on. So I'm gonna get the scan tool connected and then I'll bring you guys back up. All right, so I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. So the scan tool has identified the car already. So let's scan this and see what kind of trouble codes we have in the engine computer. So the scan tool is done scanning all the modules on the vehicle. So I'm gonna focus on the engine computer. So let's list all these control units. We have one trouble code in the engine computer. We don't have any codes in the transmission control unit, no codes in the ABS control unit, no codes in the air conditioning, and then in the electronic central electric we have 3 trouble codes. It looks like we have some burnt bulbs over here. It says left front turn signal bulb, electrical error in circuit. So this is probably just caused by a defective bulb. Okay, and everything else looks pretty good. We have a code in the radio control unit. Okay, so nothing too crazy. These control units over here that say no response, they most likely don't exist on this vehicle. So I don't think we have these control units on this vehicle. Okay, it's either they don't exist on the vehicle or they're not responding. Okay, so I believe these control units do not exist on the vehicle. So let's go back to the engine computer. So we're gonna click on this arrow over here. So right there, as you can see, we have one trouble code in the engine computer. Our trouble code is P0480.04/01152004. So it's basically P0480. And over here it says cooling fan 1 control circuit no signal / communication. So there is something wrong with the cooling fan 1. Okay, cooling fan 1 control circuit no signal. Basically this is self-explanatory. Okay, this code over here tells me that there's most likely a problem with either the fan itself or the circuit of the fan. Okay, I know this fan is controlled by the computer. So when you have this code, the problem could be the fan itself or the wiring between the computer and the fan. Okay, so right now what we're gonna do is let's go under the vehicle and reconnect the new fan that they had installed. As we reconnect it, I was told that with the key removed, the fan stays on. Okay, so let's confirm that complaint first. After the fan stays on, we're gonna disconnect it, and then I will print out the wiring diagram so we can see how this fan is wired. Once we find out how this fan is wired, then we will know which wires to check, okay? So we can fix whatever that's causing this fan to remain on while the engine is running. So now I'm gonna get the scan tool out of the way. I'm gonna turn the key off. So we're gonna remove the key. So now let's go under the vehicle and reconnect the cooling fan. So we are here under the vehicle, and this over here is our fan assembly, and the control module is part of this fan. And as you can see, the fan has been disconnected because it stays on. And I hope you guys can see this fan over here looks clean, so it's new. Okay, it's brand new. This fan was replaced. Actually, I was told that the old fan wasn't working. Okay, so the old fan wasn't working. It was removed. After installing this new fan, when everything got connected back, this fan over here stays on. So we're gonna reconnect it, and let's see what happens after we reconnect it. So I'm gonna reconnect this electrical connector. I hope you guys can see up there. So the key is off right now in the car. Well, the fan is reconnected. It's not going on. It's not going on, Bishop. Did it fix itself?
No, you have to start the engine.
Oh, you have to start the engine.
Start the engine after,
and
then it will come on.
And it will come on, okay. And then after that, once you turn the engine off, it stays on. Okay, good. All right, so we got the fan reconnected. So now we're gonna lower the vehicle and start the engine. And then we're gonna turn the engine back off to see if this fan is gonna remain, if this fan is gonna stay on. So now let's lower the vehicle. So the engine is running. So now let's go under the hood. So the engine is running, and hopefully you guys can hear that. The fan is running right now. The fan is spinning. Let me grab the light. Did it come off?
It came off.
Okay, so
Then when you turn the car off, wait a minute, they'll come back on.
it'll come back on and stay on. Okay, good. So right now the fan is off. So it initially came on, but right now it's off. So do we have to let it run for a little longer, or can I turn it off now?
About 130, 140 degrees.
So 140 degrees, so it should warm up a little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna let the engine warm up a little bit more, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can turn off the engine and see if this fan will stay on with the engine off. So I'm gonna let the engine idle, and then I'll bring you guys back up. So the engine is still running. As you can see, the fan is not spinning, so the engine is warmed up enough. So Abraham is gonna go inside the vehicle and turn off the engine. And from what I was told, after you turn off the engine, the fan goes on and it stays on. So turn off the engine. Remove the key. Okay, well, did it fix itself?
It takes maybe about a minute or so.
About a minute or so. Oh, right there. So right there, as you can see, the fan came on. And how long does it stay on? It just stays on
4 minutes plus.
and then it goes off?
No, I had to pull the negative.
Oh,
Stop it.
so at this point it's gonna go on until the battery dies. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's definitely a problem then. Okay. All right, guys. So as you can see, the fan is on and the engine is off. The key was removed. Did you remove the key?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let's observe it for another minute or so, and then we will and then we will disconnect the battery. So basically what happens is the engine runs. When the engine reaches operating temperature, you turn it off, and then the fan stays on. At that point it stays on until the battery dies. So we gotta figure out what's going on. And I want to show you guys the old fan. So here is the old fan assembly. So the original complaint was this fan wasn't working. So this fan over here, this is the fan that was replaced. So this is the old fan. This fan over here was removed, and then a new fan was installed from Rock Auto. Yeah, so an aftermarket fan was installed. So as you guys saw, the fan in the vehicle looks new. I believe we have a defective fan control unit since it's an aftermarket one, so I believe it's just gonna end up being a defective fan control unit. So I will recommend getting a fan from the dealer, and once we replace that one with the OE fan, this should be fixed. Okay, so we're not gonna let this running. I mean, let's lift up the vehicle and disconnect the fan. So as you can see right now, the fan is running constantly. So Abraham, lift up the car. Let's just get under the vehicle and disconnect it.
Connector's it's a little awkward, so that's why I did the negative.
Did the negative? Okay. Actually, Abraham, hold on. We can just undo the body. Let me grab a wrench. All right, Abraham, that's good. So the fan is on. I hope you can hear that. So we're gonna have to disconnect the battery to get this fan to go off. So right there, fan is off.
What about positive?
No, just negative, just one terminal. As you can see, the fan is now off. So we have confirmed the complaint. When the fan gets turned on, it stays on after that. So let's go to the wiring diagram and look at how this fan is wired. And then we're gonna do some tests. Fan electrical connector. If we have all the inputs and all the voltages that we're supposed to have at the cooling fan electrical connector, at that point, the problem would just be the fan itself. So now let's go to the wiring diagram and see how this fan is wired.
I mean, that fan should not go that long.
No.
Especially when it didn't even reach operating temperature.
Yeah. Alright guys, so here is the cooling fan circuit. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna find the component that's staying on, so the faulty component. So here is our cooling fan control unit. So this is the main fan and this is the second one. Now this fan over here has a ground wire, so this wire, this brown wire is a constant ground, and then there's another wire that goes to the computer. So this wire over here, I'm gonna highlight it, it goes to the computer. So this is the control wire. The computer uses this wire to control the fan control unit. And then the other wire up here, so let's highlight these two. So these two wires come from two fuses up here in the fuse box. So let's look at these two fuses. So there's a fuse over here, and this is fuse 38. It's a 10 amp fuse, and it's right there on the left side dash panel. So this over here is the fuse inside the vehicle, and this one over here is also inside the vehicle. So fuse 38 and fuse 3. Now, I don't think we have an open fuse because the fan runs, okay? The fan spins, but it stays on. So basically, we don't have a power or ground issue. If our fan wasn't working, I was gonna think about maybe checking the ground or the power wires. But since our fan works, so our ground wire and our power wires are good. So I'm going to focus on this wire over here, this control wire that comes from the computer. Now, I can look up this system and see how it works. I'm pretty sure the computer sends some type of voltage over here to control this module. I don't know if it's the computer that sends the voltage or the module that sends the voltage. It could be one or the other. Now, I don't really care right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disconnect this electrical connector and back probe this wire over here and we're gonna use our lab scope here. We're gonna back probe this wire while the fan is disconnected. We're gonna back probe this wire that I highlighted, and we're gonna be on the voltage scale to see if we have any type of voltage. If we have a voltage on this wire, if we have 5 volts or 8 volts, that voltage will come from the computer. So that will tell me that this wire is good. So at that point, the wiring integrity, the control wire integrity will be good. Okay, so if our wiring is good, then the problem will be the module itself. So which I'm starting to lean towards a defective cooling fan control unit, but let's make sure this wiring is good first before we condemn the fan control unit. So now let's go back under the vehicle and test these wires. So we are back here under the vehicle. We had to disconnect the fan because it's staying on. Now, one of these wires is going to be the control wire coming from the computer, and it's this one, the one we just saw on the wiring diagram. So this yellow wire, I'm going to back probe this and see if we have any type of control or voltage on this wire. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to test the other wires. Although the fan is spinning, but I'm just going to test them. Okay, it doesn't hurt to double check. So there will be ground on this brown wire, and then power on this red wire, and there should also be power on this small blue wire. So I'm going to back probe this one over here. We're going to back probe that. Okay, now let's back probe the other one. I'm going to back probe this too. So I'm going to use a test light to make sure that we have power at these wires. So I'm going to grab a test light so we can test these. So the other side of the test light is connected to this brown wire. So if there's power over here, and the key is on inside the vehicle, so if I touch this back probing tool, my test light should light. As you can see, the test light lights, so that's good. We have power there. Now I'm going to back probe. I'm going to back probe this blue wire now, which is supposed to have power also. Okay, so test light still connected to this ground wire over here, the brown one. So if there's power here, once I touch this back probing tool, my test light should light. So let's see what we got.
Bingo.
As you can see, test light lights. So the wiring is good. So these 3 wires are good. So I'm going to disconnect this back probing tool. So now we're going to back probe that yellow wire, the control wire, which is coming from the computer. So this one. Would you hold this way, please? Thank you. So now I'm going to back probe this wire. Okay, so now since this is the control wire, I'm not going to use a test light to test this because I don't know if we're supposed to have ground on this wire or power. So I don't know. I'm going to use a lab scope to test whatever control we have on this wire. So now I'm going to get my lab scope set up so we can connect it to this back probing tool. So we're just gonna connect our alligator clip right there, so that should be good ground. So this test lead is gonna go over here. So right there, so that's connected to the yellow wire, which is good. So now let's look at our lab scope and see what we're gonna find on the lab scope in terms of control on that wire. So we're gonna go to scope multimeter.
Something less than 12 volts.
Yeah, if we see 12 volts on that wire, I might be concerned because we can have a short to voltage on that wire. But if we see less, then I would say the wiring is good.
I really hope it's not 12 volts.
On that one wire, we have 0.01 volt. So basically kind of ground or close to ground. Like right there. Which I don't really like. I don't really like that because that wire could be shorted to ground. Let's do non-trigger. So I don't like this number that I see over here. This 0.1. So the 0.1 over here could be ground. Now, are we supposed to have ground on that wire? I don't know. Now, what I'm gonna do is, we can go two ways about this. We can go to the engine computer and disconnect the engine computer, disconnect the electrical connector at the engine computer where this wire is onto, and then we can connect our test lights to positive and touch that wire to see if we have a short to ground on this wire. Or we can start the engine, because right now the computer may not be sending a control to control this fan. Remember, this fan only comes on a couple minutes after the engine runs. So it could be that the computer is not controlling the fan right now. And if it's not controlling the fan, we won't see any type of activity or any voltage on this control wire. So I'm gonna leave it disconnected. We're gonna clear the code, because right now we have a code in memory about this fan, okay? And if you have a code, actually the computer can disable the driver of this fan inside the computer, okay? So right now, I mean, I started this with an RTL tool. I had to switch to the snap-on tool, but it's basically the same code. Oops, I'm sorry for the glare, guys. So, and our code is the same one, P0480, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to back out and clear this code. I mean, but since the fan is disconnected, we might have a code again. So let's go back and see if there's any trouble codes. So there's no code, so that's good. So let's go back to our lab scope. Okay, so right now we have a straight line. We have pretty much 0 volts, I hope you guys can see that, 0.01 volts, okay? So we're gonna lower the vehicle. We're gonna leave our fan disconnected. We're connected to the control wire. We're gonna start the engine. If we have any type of activity here, if this voltage rises as the engine is running, or if we have some type of pulse width modulated signal on this lab scope screen, that will tell me the control wire is good. At that point, we can make a definitive call that the issue is just the fan control unit, okay? So I'm gonna show you the electrical connector up here once again. As you can see, we're connected to that control wire and it's unplugged, okay? So now we're gonna lower the vehicle and start the engine. So now I'm going to go inside the car and start the engine. So right there, I don't know if you guys can see this, we have some type of activity on the screen. So I'm gonna increase our time base so we can have more detail here. So we're gonna increase the time on the screen. Let's go up to, okay. So right there, we have a control coming from the computer. So this is the computer trying to control the fan. So the wiring is good, guys. The problem is the fan.
Module?
Yeah, the module. Yeah. You see this square wave? This square wave over here? Okay. This is the control. So this is the computer trying to control the fan. Okay.
Very consistently.
Yeah. So I don't even have to start the engine, but let me just start the engine. Let's see if this control over here will change. So let's start it. Let's see what happens. So the engine is running. As you guys can hear, the engine is running, and we do have control. We have control over here on the lab scope screen. Actually, I can trigger this just to keep this more stable. That way it's not going off the screen. Okay, so right there, we do have control. So the computer is definitely trying to control this fan, but it looks like the control module is shorted internally. Yeah, the fan module is shorted. So the part that was installed is defective. And this fan was removed initially because it wasn't working, but it was, I mean, the new fan that was installed is a bad one. So that's the problem. Now, we can turn off the engine and see what happens. Because this here is the control. So this is the engine computer trying to control the fan. So it's telling it to come on. And then eventually, this is supposed to go down to tell it to go off. Yeah. So, Abraham, go inside the car. Can you turn off the engine, please? So we're gonna turn off the engine, and then with the engine off, we're gonna watch this control over here. So the engine is off. Yeah, remove the key. Okay, now close the door. So as you can see, we still have this control over here, but eventually it's gonna die out. So you see how on some cars the fan will stay on a little bit after you turn off the engine for like, I don't know, a couple seconds, and then it goes off. Yeah. So eventually it's gonna go off.
You would expect it maybe after a minute or whatever.
Yeah, after a minute. I don't know what the threshold is, but it's gonna go off.
Unless it's getting a bad signal
from
the other
temperature sensor. That's a possibility. We're gonna find it and disconnect it. That will be the last thing we can check. We're gonna find it and disconnect it, and then we should be, after that we can call it a day. Because what we can do is we can basically, while we're watching this to kind of die out, we can remove the engine cover. I believe the other sensor is somewhere around this area.
The one I did was here.
The one you did, it was here? Okay. So we can disconnect that, and then we can just look around those cooler lines and see where the other sensor is. We can also disconnect it. If we have both of them disconnected and we reconnect the fan, if the fan doesn't run, then we will know it's like one of the sensors. But if the fan continues to run, then at that point there will be no question about it. Yeah, at that point the problem will be the fan. I'm a little bit surprised how this is staying there, you know. But this control could be staying here if we have a bad input, like a bad sensor. If we have a bad sensor that's telling the computer, hey, the engine is too hot, keep the fan going, the computer will just keep turning the fan on. So at this point, what we're gonna do is we're going to disconnect the sensor. I want to disconnect those sensors because this was supposed to die down.
Surely by now.
Yeah, but it's staying on. So this is, you know, we have this control over here. So this is the computer controlling the fan. So let's find those sensors and disconnect them. So I'm gonna find the location of the sensors, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can disconnect them. So the engine has been off for a couple minutes now, and we still have this control coming from the computer on the control wire that goes to the fan assembly. Now, I didn't look up how this system works. I mean, I don't need to do that. I can, just based on the signals we're getting, I'm not sure if the module is supposed to talk back and drop this to ground, or this is supposed to actually make the module stop the fan from spinning. It's one of the two. But since we have this control over here on that control wire coming from the computer, and the engine is off, the key is on inside the vehicle, because right now I know if I was to reconnect the fan control module, the fan will stay on. So what I'm gonna do is, we were talking about temperature sensors, because we can have a defective sensor that's sending a skewed signal to the engine computer, and the computer might think like the engine temperature is high and it's gonna keep the fan on, so the fan will keep spinning. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to disconnect the temperature sensors. This engine has two temperature sensors. I'm gonna disconnect both of them, and since they are thermistors, when you disconnect a thermistor, the computer will see full voltage on the thermistor circuit, which will translate to very cold temperature. And when the engine is very cold, the fan is not going to be turned on. So the computer will not turn on the fan to cool the engine. So I'm going to disconnect both engine temperature sensors, and then we will see if our control over here on the lab scope will change. So we have one temperature sensor here. Yeah, if you can go ahead and disconnect that. These are kind of really weird. Yeah. So the first, I'm gonna show the sensor. The first temperature sensor is right over here on this elbow over here. So we're gonna disconnect this. So right there. So I got this temperature sensor disconnected. Okay. Now with this temperature sensor disconnected, the first one is disconnected, but our control didn't change. I also want to show you the data PIDs though. I want to show you the PIDs on the scan tool as I'm disconnecting these sensors. Actually, I'm gonna go back a little. Let me reconnect the sensor. So let's go to our scan tool. We're gonna go on the generic side of the scan tool. I don't want to be on the OE side because we can have some substituted values that can throw us off. So let's go to generic side. We're gonna look at some data PIDs, and we're just gonna focus on the engine coolant temperature sensor data PIDs. So let's go to data display. So here are our PIDs. So I don't want to see all these PIDs. I'm gonna customize this list. I just want to look at the engine coolant temperature sensor data PIDs. I mean engine coolant temperature. So right here, engine coolant temperature. So that's the first PID. We're gonna scroll down. Then we're gonna grab the second PID. It would be nice if we had some voltage data PIDs too, but we just have temperature data PIDs, so that's good enough. So we're gonna list this. I'm gonna graph them. So as you can see, oops, sorry. So as you can see, the first one is showing 123 degrees Fahrenheit, and the second one is also showing 123. So both of them are showing the same temperature, so which is good, okay? With this temperature over here, yeah, they're dropping down to 222 because the engine is getting cold. So that's fine. Okay, so if we go back to our lab scope, we still have this control over here on the control wire. So let's go back to the scan tool. Now, after I disconnect the temperature sensor, since we're gonna have full voltage on the temperature sensor circuit, this sensor should go down to really cold, okay? So let's do that now. So I'm gonna disconnect this. Where is that? Okay, so here's the first sensor. So I got it disconnected. So let's look at the scan tool. So right here, this one, as you can see, it was showing 122 before. Now it's showing minus 40. Okay, and this one over here is showing 183. Now this is the first sensor. We're gonna go under the vehicle and disconnect the other sensor on the lower radiator hose. So Abraham, can you lift up the car please? Sure. So we can show how we're gonna disconnect the other sensor. So first sensor is disconnected, that's good. With the first sensor disconnected, we're still showing the same type of control over here on the lab scope. So this is gonna be a defective fan. Yeah, bad fan, yeah. I don't think we have a bad temperature sensor.
Either one.
Yeah, I think they're both good. It's a fan. Let's disconnect the last one, and
our wiring's good too.
Yeah, the wiring is good, so definitely fan. The other temperature sensor lives right here. Okay, perfect. There we go. All right, so we disconnected the second one.
And
so second one is disconnected, and let's see what we got on the.
No change.
No change. Okay. But I guess that one is just for the. It must be for the gauge in the car. Yeah. But since we have a change on this one when we disconnect the first one, so I'm okay with this. I feel good about this. And right now we have both temperature sensors disconnected. We have this same control pattern over here on the lab scope. Basically, we still have this, and right now I'm pretty sure if we reconnect the fan will be going on.
Oh, yeah.
Or if we start it and the fan is gonna stay on. So
Yeah.
bad part.
Bad part.
Yeah, so this fan over here was replaced. As you guys can see, it looks new, so it's defective. Okay, so we have power, we have ground at the fan, electrical connector, and we have control. You know, let me reconnect it and see what happens. So I just reconnected it, and right there, the fan is staying on. It's staying on, but all our temperature sensors are disconnected, which is not supposed to happen because right now it should show cold. It should show cold. And yeah, and as I reconnected the control unit, the fans are on. Let's see what we have on the lab scope. Remember that pattern we had? So now it's dropped down. Okay, so yeah, bad fan. Like no questions about this. Okay, so the fan is bad. So now I'm gonna lower the vehicle so we can wrap up this video. This fan control unit needs to be replaced, and I'm gonna recommend getting a OE part. So the part that's gonna be installed here has to come from VW. So we're gonna install a VW cooling fan, and at that point this should be fixed. So now I'm gonna lower the vehicle so we can wrap up this video. All right guys, so the vehicle is down. As you guys can hear, the fan is still going on. So I'm gonna turn off the key. So the key is off. As you guys can hear, the fan is still running. So here is the old fan. Like I said, this fan was removed initially because it wasn't working. And the new fan was installed, but the new fan is defective. So we gotta install a dealer fan on this vehicle to fix this problem. All right guys, so that's it. We're gonna leave this right over here. I reconnected the sensor. We're gonna put everything back together and get this car out of here. We're gonna get a new fan control unit from the dealer. After we install it, this should be good to go. So I'm gonna leave this right over here guys. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. And if this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.